Turkey's main opposition party says early results in nationwide local elections show they're likely to keep control of key cities in what would be a major blow for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his conservative AK party. Preliminary results in both Istanbul and Ankara show the opposition edging ahead. A bad sign for Erdogan, who is hoping his party's candidate can wrest back control of Istanbul, Turkey's largest city and an economic powerhouse. The incumbent mayor of the city from the opposition, CHP Ekrem İmamoğlu, is aiming for another term. He's seen as a potential future candidate for president. Now, earlier I asked DW's Julia Hahn in Istanbul if we can expect a clear result anytime soon.
I think we might have to wait for that a little bit more. First results are now being reported. People voted for new mayors, district mayors and local administrators across the country today in 81 provinces. But for now, let's focus on the two main battlegrounds of this election, the capital Ankara and Turkey's commercial heart, Istanbul, this very big city of 16 million people. Erdogan's ruling AKP lost both cities to the opposition 5 years ago for the first time ever, and that is part of the reason why he wanted to win these cities back. Now, according to the very preliminary results we have, the opposition is in the lead in both Ankara and Istanbul. That might still change because more ballot boxes are being opened and counted. So I think before we have more reliable results, it might take a few more hours.
Julia, as a global audience, we don't often tune in for local elections. What will these results tell us about Turkey's broader political landscape here?
Well, it's local elections, but they are widely seen as very consequential for Turkey's national future, national politics, as well as, you know, President Erdogan and his ruling AKP are running this country, have been running and ruling this country for more than 2 decades now, with the opposition only maintaining a few footholds of power. So if they manage to keep these key cities, Ankara and Istanbul, most importantly, it would boost the opposition's morale. It would also be a sign for their voters who were left very disillusioned after last year's presidential election when Erdogan secured a third term in office until 2028. They were very disillusioned about their ability to change politics in this country through the ballot box. It would be a huge blow to President Erdogan. Istanbul especially is not only of strategic importance for him, it also has a personal value. This is the city where he grew up, where he started his political career as mayor in the 1990s. So that's why Istanbul is considered the biggest prize in Turkish politics. And if Ekrem İmamoğlu, the incumbent opposition mayor, manages to win the city again, experts say it would set him on track for being the next candidate against Erdogan or another candidate from the ruling AKP in Turkey's next presidential election scheduled for 2028.
And briefly, Julia, how has the process been perceived this time? Do voters think it's been a fair one?
Well, Turkey's elections, the last one in particular, was by international observers was considered as largely free but not fair. And that is what I often hear from opposition voters. President Erdogan and his party can make use of the state resources for their campaigning. They directly or indirectly control most of the country's media, according to media rights watch groups. So they have a bigger platform, they get more airtime. Opposition parties, on the other hand, often have to rely on social media. So the short answer is no, elections are not considered to be fair, particularly by anti-Erdogan voters, opposition voters.
Julia Hahn in Istanbul, thank you so much. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defied masses of protesters calling for early elections, claiming the move would only benefit Hamas. Tens of thousands are staging a protest against Netanyahu's government in Jerusalem, with pressure mounting over the failure to secure a deal for the release of Israeli hostages. Now, Defiant Netanyahu vowed to bring back all hostages using a combination of military force and talks. He also said victory over Hamas would not be possible without a ground offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Now, Simon Mabon is a Middle East analyst at the UK's Lancaster University. I asked him earlier what he thinks about Netanyahu's criticising of protesters' demand for early elections and his argument that this would just benefit Hamas.
Yeah, I think we need to contextualise this in the sense that there has been a lot of anger directed at Benjamin Netanyahu over the past however many years. Most of his time in office has been characterised by anger, frustration, political divisiveness, and none more so than the past couple of years. He faces challenges from the right, from the religious right, from people who are frustrated at the religious right. There are protests and growing anger at the exclusion of military service for members of the Haredi community. And so to say that this is all about the Hamas situation or the inability to get the hostages back, I think is misguided. And I think it points to a much deeper frustration that is brewing within Israeli society at Netanyahu's political acumen and his political maneuverings.
So, Simon, the pressure is mounting, the frustration is mounting, but is there any sign of it getting to him at this point?
Well, we've heard reports that he is due to undergo a medical procedure, an unexpected one. Perhaps that is his body responding to stress in some way, shape or form. But aside from that, he is maintaining his confident, cool, outward, forceful persona that has characterized his style of leadership. He is defiant in the face of seemingly global criticism of Israel's military offensive in southern Gaza, and he's defiant in the face of these protests, which is surprising given the scale of it, and yet not surprising given that if he would be removed from power, then his legal battles, his own personal legal battles, would once again become central in his life.
An Israeli delegation, Simon, arrived in Cairo for truce talks, but while that's happening, Netanyahu is saying that there will be no victory over Hamas without a military operation into Rafah. So where does all that leave hopes then of finding an agreement?
Well, I guess this is why diplomacy is the ultimate answer here. There has to be a diplomatic breakthrough. The lives of huge numbers of people are being directly affected by ongoing military action in Gaza. The hope of a ceasefire right now is not looking good, but I think it's imperative to keep the talks going. The growing pressure on all sides to find some type of diplomatic solution increases day by day. And I would imagine that is the hope of the international community. That's certainly the hope of Joe Biden and others, that growing international pressure will put a stop to any Israeli plans to go into Rafah, but also to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages as well. So it's growing diplomatic pressure, I guess.
And from Simon Mabon at Lancaster University, let's take a look at some of the other stories making news around the world this hour. Pope Francis has led Easter Sunday Mass at the Vatican in front of some 30,000 faithful. Despite persistent rumours about the 87-year-old's health, he appeared in good form as he presided over events. He used his Easter message on Christianity's holiest day to invoke prayers for victims of war. 8 people were killed in a shooting in Ecuador on Saturday, in the second mass killing in as many days. No group has claimed responsibility for the latest attack. On Friday, 5 tourists were executed by an armed gang. Police said drug traffickers mistook them for a rival gang. A kayaker is missing in western France after heavy rains and overflowing rivers flooded several regions. Authorities are expecting a 100-year flood in some areas, with water levels rising up to 7 metres. More than 500 emergency workers have been mobilised. Now, a coalition of opposition parties in India are holding a mega rally in Delhi against what they say is a decaying of democracy under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's rule. It follows the arrest of senior opposition figure and Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in connection with the long-running corruption probe. At least 4 more of Modi's political opponents are also under investigation. Critics say the charges are politically motivated. The country will hold elections starting in April. Well, DW's Sandra Petersman attended that rally in Delhi and sent us her thoughts.
The India Alliance, an alliance of more than 20 oppositional parties, asserts that this joint protest is literally their last chance to save the country's constitution and democracy. This big rally here today was prompted by the recent arrest of Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal by the Enforcement Directorate, which is an agency investigating serious financial crime and corruption. Allegedly, Mr. Kejriwal is involved in a so-called liquor licensing scandal in which his party stands accused of accepting bribes and kickbacks. Now, there are two very different narratives about Mr. Kejriwal's arrest on March 21st. The first comes from the ruling party BJP. The BJP argues that nobody is above the law, not even the sitting Chief Minister of Delhi. And they point out that Mr. Kejriwal was summoned 9 times for questioning before his arrest, but he never showed up. Hence, the enforcement agency had no other choice but to arrest him. The opposition on the other side of the political divide, especially Mr. Kejriwal's Aam Aadmi Party, argues that the arrest is based on false allegations and that his arrest fits the government's general pattern of using the country's investigating agencies and the income tax department to pressure the leading politicians of the opposition. The opposition portrays Mr. Kejriwal as a political martyr who does not give in to the bullying of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his ruling BJP.
Sandra Petersman there in Delhi. Well, anyone shopping for chocolate Easter eggs this year has probably noticed they're more expensive than ever. That's because the price of cocoa beans has soared to record highs. In West Africa, where most of the world's cocoa is grown, farmers have seen 3 years of bad harvests. That has summoned the industry warning of a chocolate meltdown.
Easter chocolates in London, a tradition that goes back well over 100 years. This year, though, things are different. The cost of cocoa is driving up prices all around. This chocolate maker's suppliers in West Africa have been hit hard.
The cocoa that we get from them has dropped by 1/3 of what they can supply, and also that means that their price has doubled.
These cocoa plants in Ivory Coast are diseased. They fall to the ground and rot. It's been wet and hot. That encourages the diseases that prey on cocoa beans. If you don't spray the fields quickly, then the disease comes to take over your fields. You can lose everything. When it blackens your cocoa, the pods disintegrate, they rot before they're picked. Rising prices have not translated into more income for cocoa farmers here. Many have little to sell and in some cases nothing. Experts say that has to do with the weather in Ivory Coast and neighboring Ghana, which together supply much of the world's cocoa.
They had extremely heavy rainfall late last year, and now this very early, very unseasonal heat wave that damaged the crops even further. And that means that there's just a lot less cacao to go around this year, which of course has a huge impact on prices.
Back in Europe, the chocolate eggs are smaller and they cost more. And demand is rising, a recipe for more expensive Easter sweets in the years ahead.
And that is all the news for this hour. Now, up next, the story of a Syrian refugee who became the mayor of a German town just 8 years after fleeing war in his home country. That incredible story coming up after a short break. I'm Anthony Howard in Berlin. Thanks for your company. Don't forget our website at dw.com, and socials like Insta are found by using the handle @DW News. I'll be back with the team here with more news in 45 minutes' time. For now, it's goodbye.